So thanks to the efforts of President Trump, 20 families have been reunited now that all of the living hostages have been released from Gaza. And now peace in the Middle East is closer than it has been for decades. Joining us now is one of the Democrats applauding the president for this accomplishment in New Jersey, Congressman Josh Gottheimer. Congressman, thanks so much for joining the program this morning.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So you, like many other Americans, just not Americans, folks all over the world, are applauding the president for this peace agreement. What's your reaction this morning?
Yesterday was a very emotional day, as you know, and I'm sure, like so many people watching the videos of parents and loved ones hugging their family members after not seeing them for more than 2 years, knowing what was happening in those tunnels, hostages being tortured by Hamas terrorists day in and day out after the October 7th massacre and what happened, not just on that day, but how Hamas treated the hostages after that. So seeing them free and out and with their loved ones, I mean, it was an incredibly emotional day. And I give so much credit to these families who just kept up hope and never given up.
Mm-hmm. Congressman, I think you have great instincts. You're part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. You're always trying to work across the other side of the aisle. What do you say to some of the Democrats that left the president out of the congratulations, even some taking credit for it, saying this was a Biden proposal? You also have Hakeem Jeffries, who said, "I'm so relieved and thankful to see the remaining living hostages are now home with their loved ones." He didn't mention the president. Nancy Pelosi, the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and the release of all the hostages gives hope for what comes next after unbearable suffering. Of course, Bernie Sanders said today we welcome the long overdue release of all 20 remaining Israelis, held by Hamas, and the freeing of almost 2,000 Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. What's your advice for them?
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues, but I can speak for myself.
Yeah.
I know what I believe, which was yesterday was a great day for American leadership, and obviously, thanks to President Trump and his team, it happened. I mean, I had a hostage here from New Jersey, Don Alexander, who's 21, who the president helped free with his team. So, we should give credit where it's due, and this is not a partisan thing. We should all be very proud as Americans of our leadership and what got done thanks to us. And also, by the way, I'm one of these people, and I'm sure you'd agree, that we should give credit to everybody. And so 100 hostages were released in the last administration. We should give credit to them too. And everybody, this is one of those things where everybody who is involved, but especially the parents, everybody should be very proud. And now, as you know, the key is keeping Hamas's feet to the fire, because we still have to get out. We released 20 hostages yesterday, but there's 24 more hostages who we believe are no longer alive, whose remains are in Gaza. We have to hold them accountable until we get every single one out, so that these families can have closure and properly mourn. And and then, of course, we have to make sure that Hamas lays down their weapons and hands over governing power. So there's a lot of work still to do. We all have to work together, stop pointing fingers, and just get this done. And to me, that's the most important thing. Again, great American leadership yesterday. We should all be very proud.
I like the way you think, and you talk about leadership and working together. The government is now being shut down back here at home for 14 days now. What is it going to take to get the government open? Many of the Republicans say this is just a clean CR. Let's vote for this. And if there is...
President Trump is back in Washington this morning from the Middle East after signing off on the peace plan to put an end to the Israel-Hamas war. The historic deal earning Trump praise from all sides, including some of his most vocal critics.
Look, I don't think that we should hold credit where it's due. And I commend the people who have been a part of this process. I'd commend the Qataris, the Egyptians, and the president.
It's a really significant first step, and I really commend President Trump and his administration, as well as Arab leaders in the region.
Here to react is former counselor to President Trump and Fox News contributor Kellyanne Conway. So there's a lot of minimizing going on there, but at least they cough out the name. Should we take that as a victory?
They do, and thanks, Charlie, for having me. I noticed on Twitter a lot of our Democratic elected officials are commending what happened yesterday, but they're leaving out the word Trump. You know, it's been several years, Charlie, since Twitter went from 140 characters to 280. They can put five more letters in there, but they just can't. And look, I think the real question yesterday was Barack Obama trying to get in on this. He actually accepted in the war, but it's Trump who achieved peace. And Obama is sort of crediting Trump for doing this, but all the while chastising his party for not maybe being a little more congratulatory of President Trump was fascinating, too. Look, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, that's great because they were part of the problem, not the solution here. This is a 3,000-year war. That massacre that happened was 2 years ago. So it was smack in the middle of the the Biden-Harris years. Right. And it took Trump, who's one of one, to do this. But, Charlie, I want people to remember, President Trump laid the groundwork in his first term for all of this. In the first year, he kept the promise of 7 presidents, Republican and Democrat, to move the embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, return the Golan Heights, started the Abraham Accords, took out Soleimani, and started to have relationships with those Arab states. This is key. And you saw never President Clinton, the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton commend this yesterday when she said she'd like to talk about those leaders too. It's President Trump who tried to soften those relationships, taking out Soleimani and saying, listen, you're no longer going to harbor and mollify these terrorists like Hamas and Hezbollah in your countries. Instead, you're going to come to the negotiating table. If I were President Xi of China and Putin of Russia, I'd queue up and get in line to do the next deals with Donald Trump.
Yeah, the key to President Trump is appealing to people's self-interest, and he's always very wise about that. And even your greatest enemies, even if it's Hamas. You mentioned President Obama. He is back to lecturing. I want to play a clip for you and get your response to it.
What I saw and I think this was a fault of some progressive language, was almost asserting a holier-than-thou superiority that's not that different from what we used to joke about coming from, the right and the moral majority and, our way, and a certain fundamentalism about how to think about stuff that I think was dangerous.
So Obama is now lecturing us about not being holier than thou.
I want everybody to roll the tape in 2022, but particularly, Charlie, in 2024, when it was Obama out there wagging his finger, scolding and shaming and screaming sometimes from his bully pulpit, demanding that people listen to him and vote for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Senate candidate X. And by the way, a lot of folks didn't listen to him, particularly young African-American and Hispanic men who voted for him overwhelmingly. They didn't listen to him. They rejected that because they have more connective tissue with Donald Trump and his agenda. And so I think, look, I wouldn't say he's slouching. I think Obama is not slouching to irrelevance yet, but certainly to an annoyance. And for him to call other people scolds after that's exactly what he did is pretty rich.
Exactly.
By the way, in that same interview, he gave a shout out to the companies and the universities who are not capitulating and negotiating with the Trump administration. He told them to stay firm. And last point, he basically did not renounce his position on men and women's sports in that same interview with a non-funny comedian. What he did was he said, we just needed to message it better. We needed to communicate it better. So I think some of the original sins, like defund the police and men and women's sports, that started with Obama. But I don't know. His political track record, his crystal ball has been pretty murky recently.
Murky at best. Kellyanne Conway, thank you so much.